The wind off the white knife tasted of iron and pine as Torrhen Stark reined his horse at the crest of a low ridge and gazed south across the green expanse of the neck. Below, where mist rolled like ghost-white banners over tangled fens, the fires of his host guttered in the damp dawn, spears and standards pricking the haze, shields stacked in neat half-moons. A hush lay over the camps, broken only by the muted clatter of cooks and the huff of horses. Farther still, beyond the marshland's ragged edge, 3 new fires burned on the horizon, brighter than sunrise itself and tinged an uncanny red. There, dragons waited. Torrhen had never seen a dragon, but he could imagine their shapes in those columns of ruddy smoke, wings vast enough to cast castles into shadow, scales gleaming like fresh-forged mail, mouths aglow with the embers of ancient doom. Yet it was not dread that tightened his throat so much as curiosity. For all the iron-born raids he had crushed, for all the wildling kings he had hurled back beyond the wall, never had Torrhen Stark based a power older than winter itself, nor one so coldly certain of victory. Behind him, the crunch of boot heels stirred frost-brittle grass. His bastard brother Brandon Snow drew abreast, black hair whipped by the same wind that teased Torrhen's silverwolf cloak. "You've ridden ahead before dawn," Brandon said softly. "The men will whisper of ill omens." "Let them whisper," Torrhen replied without turning. "It is quiet counsel that keeps a man alive, not idle fireside cheer. Tell me, brother, how does one parley with a dragon?" Brandon's breath misted in the blue light. "With caution, and with an eye for the rider rather than the beast." Torrhen exhaled. Somewhere, unseen, a wolf howled. Distant yet hauntingly clear, as if the north itself had breathed a warning through the throats of its children. "Send word to the captains. We march at first light to the Fever River ford. There I will meet this Aegon, if he is minded to speak." Brandon hesitated, then bowed. "As you will, your grace." 2 days later, near the moss-slick stones of the Fever River crossing, Torrhen Stark rode beneath fluttering white banners, sewn hastily with a red sedge-pointed star, the sigil the Dragon Lord demanded of those who bent the knee. Torrhen bore instead the direwolf of Winterfell, its gray hide stark against a field of Winterfell white. A silent declaration that the blood of the first men still ran unbroken in his veins. Aegon Targaryen awaited him on a low earthwork beside the ford, flanked by his sisters Rhaenys and Visenya. Behind them squatted their monsters, Meraxes, pale as morning pearl, Vhagar, bronze-green and sly, and the great black dread that was Balerion, whose folded wings loomed like burnt ruins against the gray sky. Torrhen felt their heat even at 100 paces. A living forge that smelled of ash and ancient bone. Yet it was the riders he studied. Aegon wore no crown, only a plain circlet of dark Valyrian steel, but the look in his violet eyes was crown enough. Neither arrogance nor contempt colored his gaze. Instead, Torrhen saw a calm, almost solemn regard, as though the Dragon Lord sought to weigh the measure of a man rather than his army. Rhaenys smiled, curiosity alive in every line of her playful mouth. Visenya watched like a sword unsheathed. Torrhen dismounted, handing the reins to Brandon. Alone he strode forward until a spear's length remained between king and conqueror. The wind plucked at their cloaks, snarling the direwolf about Torrhen's shoulders, snapping the three-headed dragon, black on red, at Aegon's back. "I am Torrhen Stark," he said, voice carrying clear across the hush of the ford. "King in the north, lord of Winterfell and of the First Men's realm. You come as conqueror. I come as guardian of my folk. Let us speak plainly." Aegon inclined his head. "I am Aegon of House Targaryen, first of my name. Rider of Balerion, heir of old Valyria, and soon, by the will of gods and men, king of all Westeros. Yet titles matter less than purpose. I would spare your folk the steel and fire I have already loosed upon the south. I would unite the realms, not scourge them." Damned who? Behind Torrhen, the rustle of mail marked Brandon's shifting stance, ready to die if need be. Torrhen lifted a hand to still him. "Spare us?" Torrhen's smile showed no mirth. "You burnt Heron's towers as though they were tinder in a hearth. You shattered the field of fire and left 2 kings charred husks. Would you have me sell my people's pride for fear of the same? We remember no king but the king in the north. Pride is a hard shield, Visenya said, her voice low. But dragons make ash of harder things. Rhaenys' tone was softer. Your men are brave. Let them live to guard your forests and your snows. Bend the knee and winter will still come, but you will meet it with dragons at your side rather than above. Torrhen felt the pull of their words like opposite tides. Visenya's threat, Rhaenys' promise. Yet it was Aegon's silence that compelled him most. The Conqueror waited, neither pleading nor intimidating, as if he trusted Torrhen's reason above his own power. What would you ask of me? Torrhen said at last. Beyond the knee. Aegon's gaze flicked northward, as though seeing past Torrhen to the frosted wilds beyond the neck. The realm I seek to build must endure. I have dragons, yet dragons alone do not bind men's hearts. Blood ties do. The north is ancient, proud, and as stubborn as stone. If I win your swords by fire, your grandsires will sow rebellion in memory of your ashes. If I win your loyalty by trust, your descendants will remember honor instead of fear. Torrhen's brows knit tight. You speak of a marriage alliance. A pact, Aegon said, voice firm. An heir pact, sealed for all generations. One heir of House Targaryen, be he my son, grandson, or great-grandson, shall always wed a daughter of House Stark, and one daughter of the Dragon King shall always wed a Stark heir in her turn. Thus dragon blood and wolf's blood will mill, tempering fire with winter steel. So long as the pact is kept, the North shall remain a kingdom beneath the crown. Its laws, its gods, its lords, its... Silence rippled outward like circles on still water. Brandon shifted again. Torrhen sensed the disbelief rolling through his brother. In all the tales of ancient days, dragons had taken what they would by force. Yet here, the greatest of them offered not just mercy, but kinship. And if the pact is broken, Torrhen asked, then the weirwoods may judge us both, Aegon said. But first the pact must be made. Torrhen searched the Dragon Lord's face. Lightning crackled in distant clouds. A sharp scent of rain cut the air. At that moment, Torrhen felt every mile of icy moorland, every hearth and hall, every child who bore the Stark sigil upon a carved wooden toy. To kneel was to save them, but to kneel without honor was to doom their souls. Slowly, he sank to one knee, the mud of the fever ford soaking through thick leather. He drew his sword and laid it flat across open palms, ice-bright steel catching the glint of dragonfire. I, Torrhen Stark, King in the North, do yield my crown in exchange for my people's safety, and for the forging of this heir pact between our lines unto the ending of days. A hush fell, broken only by the hiss of rain upon Dragonhide. Aegon stepped forward. With ceremonial grace he touched 2 fingers to Torrhen's brow, then to the upturned flat of the blade. In the sight of gods old and new, and in witness of dragons and direwolves, I accept your fealty and your pact. Rise, Lord Torrhen Stark, Warden of the North, blood brother to House Targaryen. Ain. When Torrhen stood, the first drops of rain darkened the ground between them. A moment later, thunder rolled. That night, beneath canvas heavy with stormwater, Torrhen studied the parchments drafted by Aegon's maesters, careful lines of Valyrian ink upon lambskin, outlining the terms of the heir pact. Brandon Snow paced the narrow confines of the tent. You trust his word? Brandon asked. His word, yes. His dragons, more. Torrhen traced a clause with one calloused finger. Yet this pact buys more than peace. It buys influence in the heart of the crown itself. Think, brother. Stark blood on the Iron Throne. Children of ice and fire. When future Aegons dream of conquest, they will dream with the eyes of wolves. Mento Moan. Brandon's frown softened, though doubt lingered. And when the North needs help, will dragons fly north for us? They shall, Torrhen answered quietly, remembering the cold beyond the wall where other things stirred. Winter comes for all men, Targaryen as well as Stark. A bond of heirs may save us both, when swords and oaths alone would fail. Thunder cracked again. shaking the tent poles, and for an instant, Torhin pictured a different thunder in some distant winter. The beating of dragon wings over snow-buried keeps, their fire lighting the night against the darkness that crept from the Corb's white forest. He closed the parchment scroll and affixed his seal. A direwolf pressed in charcoal-colored wax beside the three-headed dragon in crimson. Outside, rain rattled like arrows on shieldwood. But Torhin's thoughts turned north, past the neck, past the lonely hills and frozen lakes, to Winterfell's ancient crypts where the kings of winter lay dreaming. Beneath stone effigies of his fathers, Torhin imagined a dragon egg settling, warm and pulsing, in the dark, a seed of covenant that might one day hatch into salvation or ruin. News of the Pact moved through the north on swift hooves and swifter tongues. Some hailed Torhin as the wise king who spared their sons the fire. Others whispered, Kneeler, with scorn sharpened by ale and wounded pride. Yet snow fell early that year, and with it came the first stories of cold things seen in moonlit glens, blue shadows clutching frost-rimed spears, pale hounds whose howls turned marrow to ice. The old tales returned like wolves to a long-abandoned hall, and folk began to wonder whether dragons at their side might not be worth more than crowns upon their heads. At Winterfell, Queen Miranda, Torrhen's lady, fierce of spirit and sharp of tongue, walked the wolf's-wood paths with a raven-haired princess at her side. Rhaena Targaryen, eldest daughter of Rhaenys. Though but 12, Rhaena carried herself with the poise of a grown queen, her Valyrian eyes reflecting the autumn leaves like slivers of dusk-lit amethyst. She ran gloved fingers along the rough bark of a weirwood, its red leaves fluttering about her like silent prayers. "Do your gods speak?" she asked Miranda, voice hushed. "They whisper," Miranda replied. "But sometimes the wind carries more truth than words." "Do your dragons speak?" "Balerian's roars are a language all his own." Rhaena smiled, revealing the gap of a newly lost milk tooth. "He says the north smells of secrets." Miranda laughed softly. "A wise beast. Keep your secrets close, princess. The wind has long ears." Later, in the great hall, thick with firelight and savory smoke, Torhin announced the first binding of the Pact. In 3 years' time, when Rhaena flowered into womanhood, she would wed his heir, young Roderick Stark. The boy of 9 sat wide-eyed beside his father, curls the color of chestnuts and cheeks, smudged by training yard dirt. Dark. He stared at Rhaena as though she were a comet fallen into his soup trenchers. The hall erupted in cheers and groans in equal measure. Yet beneath the clamor, Torhin sensed a tremor of fate, an echo of some far-off time when dragon blood would mingle with wolf's blood for the first time, setting in motion currents unseen. Far to the south, in dragon-stoned smoky halls, Visenya Targaryen sharpened dark sister, while Aegon watched the crimson surf lash the obsidian shore. The pact was inked, sealed, and bound by the faith of the Seven. Yet a weight still sat upon the Conqueror's shoulders heavier than any crown. "You doubt this?" Visenya asked without turning. Her whetstone sang along folded Valyrian steel. "I doubt many things," Aegon murmured, "but not Torrhen Stark's honor. Still, the pact we forge with the North will shape the realm in ways neither maester nor mage can foresee. Perhaps I have traded one war for 1,000 smaller storms." Visenya sheathed dark sister. "Storms end, brother. Fire and blood abide. If the pact fails, dragons will write its final chapter. And if it succeeds," Aegon's voice grew soft, almost wistful, "if ice and fire do become one?" Visenya's answer came as a whisper drowned by the roar of sea against stone. But whatever word she spoke hung over Dragonstone like an omen, carried inland on wings of salt and mist. Seasons turned. In Winterfell, Rhaena learned to ride shaggy northern garrons and to shoot a weirwood self-bow almost as tall as she was. Roderick learned High Valyrian at her side, stumbling over guttural consonants while she laughed like bells in a snowstorm. When spring thawed the last ice from the pools, they dared each other to plunge into the glassy water and emerged shivering, giggling, bonded by secrets only children share. The realm beyond also thawed. Lords who had held out against the dragon banners bent their knees after seeing Targaryen pennants flying beside deer wolves on the King's Road. In castles from White Harbor to Duskendale, maesters copied the terms of the Heir Pact into new archives, noting its unprecedented breadth. It bound not just the current generation but all unborn heirs, a wad of blue thread weaving through the loom of centuries. Yet peace is a candle in a drafty hall, flickering even while it burns bright. Along the wall, rangers brought back grim tidings, dead wildlife found frozen yet unrotted, their eyes filmed over with frost. Eerie lights in the forest that moved against the wind. And farther east, on hard gray seas, the krakens of black tide whispered of storms carrying shards of white as hard as iron, like the bones of winter itself hurled onto their decks. Word reached Winterfell on a chill summer morning. Torrhen received the Night's Watch brothers in the solar, where the hearth still crackled despite green fields beyond the window. Their faces were pale with exhaustion, black cloaks stiff with salt and ice. "The dead walk," said Sir Waymar, a master gat Harms with a ragged scar across his brow. "We lost 5 men beyond the Shadow Tower. They rose again before our eyes." Torrhen's gaze flicked to the crimson wax of the Heir Pact, seldom far from his table. He thought of dragons beating their wings up the long leagues of the King's Road, of Rhaena's small hand pressed to the direwolf carved on Winterfell's gate. The promise of Aegon's help felt suddenly fragile, like thin ice over deep water. He summoned ravens that very hour, sending a message south borne by black wings swifter than any horse. "The long night stirs. Remember the Heir Pact. Send fire." On Dragonstone, Rhaenys stood upon a high tower feeding scraps of charred mutton to Meraxes when the raven arrived. She read Torrhen's words once, twice, then hastened down winding stairs to find Aegon in council with his small-folk quartermasters. "The north calls for dragons," she said, breathless but steady. Aegon dismissed the stewards. In the empty hall, candlelight struck purple sparks in his eyes. "So soon. Sooner than we hoped. A threat older than our line awakens. The Starks have kept vows. Now we must keep ours." Aegon touched the raven's ribbon, icy to the skin. In that instant, he saw visions untamed. White shadows advancing over frozen rivers, the chill breath of an enemy no dragon fire had ever tested. He thought of Valyria's doom, when even dragon lords perished in fire-curdled shadow. Was this another doom, carved of ice instead of flame? "Tell Visenya to ready Vagar," he said at last. "We fly north at dawn." Rhaenys hesitated. "And the capital?" "The Vale yet mutters, Dorne still resists." "They can mutter and resist while summers last," Aegon replied, voice low as surf on black shores. "If winter swallows the north, it will not stop at the neck. The realm I seek to forge must be forged anew in dragonfire, tempered by winter's frost." He looked south, through an open arch toward the faint glow of King's Landing rising on the mainland like a budding rose of stone. One day it would be the heart of his realm. But hearts could freeze. He turned from the view, cloak swirling like smoke. "We fly to Winterfell, and we will see if our pact is strong enough to shatter the cold." Then to Trumsea. Beneath lengthening twilight, Roderick Stark and Rhaena Targaryen clambered up the broken battlements of the First Keep. Winterfell's oldest, half-ruined tower where snow collected even in high summer. They sat on crumbling stone, legs dangling over dizzying emptiness, and shared a stolen waterskin of honeyed wine. "Do you think dragons will truly come?" Roderick asked, brushing wind-tossed hair from his eyes. "They will," Rhaena said, certainty ringing like steel. She traced a shallow groove in the stone with one finger. "My father says a pact is more than ink. It is soul-binding. Dragons honor their souls." Roderick glanced at the darkening world beyond the walls. He had heard the whispers from the wall, seen the worry crease his father's brow. Fear coiled in his belly, but beside him, Rhaena's calm was infectious, like a small warmth against the chill. "What if the dead march here?" he dared. "Then we stand, you and I." Rhaena turned to meet his gaze, violet eyes luminous in fading light. "Wolf and dragon together. That is the promise." "Last." Roderick felt the truth of her words settle upon him with a gravity deeper than his childhood. He wondered if Torrhen had felt the same gravity kneeling before the Fever River. The Heir Pact was no longer a story told at feasts. It was the marrow of their bones, the shape of the path beneath their feet. A sudden gust shook loose a swirl of red leaves from the heart tree in the godswood. They spiraled upward like sparks from an unseen fire, dancing across the sky where the first stars pierced the dusk. Roderick watched them drift, and for a heartbeat, he thought he saw the shape of wings among them, vast and shadowy, eclipsing constellations. But it was only the leaves, red as dragonflame, born on the breath of the north. Winter, in truth, came early. Frost silvered the fields by mid-harvest, and snowdrifts piled so high against the walls of Moat Cailin that ravens perched upon them, like black memories of summer. Yet no dragons crossed the sky. Torrhen waited, scanning each dawn, horizon for a flare of fire or the thunder of wings. Instead, he received tidings of southern unrest. Dorne harried the marches, the Vale threatened to rise, and Aegon's fleet lay bottled by storms off storms, and in the courtyard, Roderick practiced with sword and shield under Brandon's stern eye, while Rhaena learned the dialect of the free folk from an old wildling hostage. At night, the two children pored over dusty tomes of dragon lore and legends of the others, flanked by flickering candles and the somber murmur of distant winds. Meanwhile, the Night's Watch lost 3 more ranging parties. On the last day of the year's second moon, a single horn blast echoed from the outer wall of Winterfell. Traveler sighted, gates groaned open to admit not a knight, nor merchant, but a solitary rider astride a lathered Garin, wrapped head to heel in black, bearing a bundle swaddled in bare fur. Guards gasped at his frost-bitten face, at the eerie blue tint to his lips. Yet it was the bundle that drew Torrhen's breath when unfurled, the severed hand of a ranger, fingers curled like dead spiders, flesh pale as milk. Beneath the skin shimmered a faint unnatural sheen, as though tiny crystals of ice crawled within. This was the Lord Commander, the rider rasped before collapsing. He rose, and he burned. Only fire stopped him. Torrhen gripped the cold hand, fear and fury intertwining. The Pact's parchment weighed heavy at his hip. He summoned every raven in the rookery. "Send fire," he wrote, pressing his seal until wax dripped like blood. "Or the north will freeze, and the rest with us." On the red Isle of Dragonstone, storms churned unceasing. Lightning stitched the sky. Within the great stronghold, Aegon stalked the long gallery where carved stone dragons coiled overhead. "The winds forbid flight," Visenya said. Gauntleted arms folded. Rain hammered stained-glass windows like thrown daggers. "Winds be damned," Aegon snarled. "If Balerion cannot master a storm, no dragon ever could." He paced, yet flying blind into frozen clouds' courts doom no less than leaving the north unaided. "We must choose." Rhaenys entered, cloak soaked, hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes shining with determination. "There is a way," she declared softly. "Not through the sky, but through the sea." Aegon halted. "You would sail?" "The narrow sea churns with the same storms." "Not to sail around," she said. "To sail above." Visenya frowned. "Speak sense, sister." Rhaenys walked to a great window where wind howled through ironwork. "Dragonstone is high. If we mount at the summit and take wing northeast, we can skirt the stormfront's upper edges. Balerion's furnace heat will shield us from sleet. Meraxes can ride his wake. Vygar, lighter, will follow. It is perilous, but less so than waiting." "Me sound." Aegon weighed her words, feeling the steady burn of resolve in her gaze. He thought of Torrhen's latest raven, its ink smeared by the rider's shivering hand. Fire or freeze, ice or ash. "At first light," he said, "we fly." Dawn never fully came on that gray morning over Winterfell. Snow shook from low clouds like sifted flour, muting sound, smothering color. In the godswood, Roderick and Rhaena stood beneath the heart tree, each holding a candle lit from the central brazier of the great hall. "Do you feel it?" Rhaena whispered. The air lay still, so cold it seemed to ring like glass. Roderick listened. In the hush he caught a distant rumble, faint as memory, yet growing. It was not thunder. It was rhythm. Slow, immense, Wings. They rushed from the godswood into the courtyard as men shouted, pointing skyward. Through torn gray clouds emerged a shape colossal and black, a living nightfall streaked with whirls of fire. Balerion the Black Dread. Flames jetted from his jaws, searing the snow to vapor before a single flake could settle on his hide. In his shadow glided Meraxes, silver and gold, wings beating the storm like a second sun behind clouds. And swift Vhagar, emerald and copper, talons skimming treetops. A roar shook the very foundations of Winterfell. Children shrieked, some in terror, many in awe. Roderick felt his heart slam against his ribs with joy and fear so mingled, they were indistinguishable. Dragons had come, honoring the Pact. Balerion landed in the outer bailey, torrents of steam blasting from nostrils. From his neck climbed Aegon Targaryen in black mail and dark fur. Sword at hip, crown glimmering like dawn's first star. Rhaenys slid down Merax's flank in a spray of melted snow, while Visenya leapt lightly from Vhagar, boots crunching frost. Torrhen strode forth, hand on wolf pommel, his breath plumed. You came. A sworn, Aegon said. Around him, knights of wolf and dragon bowed heads in unison, their breath mingling in the frozen air. And not a moment too soon, Torrhen added, producing the dead ranger's hand. The true enemy walks already. Aegon's jaw tightened. He extended a gloved hand toward the hellish heat emanating from Balerion's scales. Frost vapor hissed between them, symbol of two elements meeting. Then let us ride to meet it, together. Top the ramparts common folk gathered, sons of smiths and daughters of crofters, staring at the impossible made flesh. Dragons and direwolves united. Somewhere in that throng, old men trembled at omens, young lovers clasped shaking hands, children laughed. Roderick looked at Rhaena. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright as twin amethysts. Wolf and dragon, he murmured. Together, she echoed, sliding her gloved fingers through his. Their breath mingled in the frozen air, two white plumes entwining like fledgling spirits. Above them, Balerion unfurled wings that blotted the pale disk of the sun. The sound was like a blacksmith's bellows, like the sudden opening of a door onto realms uncharted. And somewhere beyond the wall, blue eyes flickered in restless darkness, sensing the flame that now rose in challenge. That night, Winterfell blazed with torchlight as preparations began for a march northwards that would etch itself into chronicles yet unwritten. In the great hall, maps unrolled across tables, pins marking supply lines from White Harbor to Deepwood, Moti Ta. Targaryen captains debated with northern lords, voices heated yet respectful. Words like scythe formation and firebreak lines mingled with older, wilder terms. Weirwood warding, dragonglass stockpiles, labyrinth trenches in the permafrost. Torrhen watched Aegon bend over a map drawn by children of the forest centuries past, inked not in maester's black, but tree-sap green, bearing symbols of suns and moons. The Dragon Lord traced the curve of the wall with a gloved fingertip. Our flames can clear swathes, but we dare not melt the wall's ancient sorcery, he mused. Then we make our stand before it, Torrhen said. And we do so soon. Each passing day strengthens the others. Aegon nodded. Tomorrow we fly reconnaissance to Eastwatch. Meraxes and Vhagar will scour the haunted forest. Balerion will hold here until I return. He glanced toward the far side of the hall where Roderick and Rhaena sat with Brandon, poring over smaller charts. Children at first glance, yet heirs of ice and fire by pact and by destiny. Aegon's gaze softened. They grow quickly, Torrhen observed, following his eyes. As must the realm, Aegon replied. Their union may yet forge a peace deeper than mine, but only if we safeguard their world first. He straightened, half-smile faint. Tell me, Lord Torrhen, did you ever expect dragons to winter in your halls? Torrhen chuckled. Sound as rough as birch bark. I expected many things of winter. Hunger, death, long nights, but never this. His expression sobered. Yet here we are. May we both live long enough to be surprised again. Aegon offered a warrior's clasp, forearm to forearm. Together then, oath brother. Together, Torrhen echoed. And in that clasp, two kings sealed anew, the pact that bound the fate of kingdoms and the hearts of children not yet born. Outside, snow fell thicker, but between each flake glimmered sparks from forge fires working through the night, fashioning arrowheads of dragonglass, tips of spears, the thin blades called frostfangs. Ravens flurried overhead, carrying messages to every keep still standing. In the rookery, Maester Harmon scratched a final note into his ledger before banked coals. On this night, dragons roost in Winterfell. Omens yet unclear. Pray the old gods accept new allies. Yet gods are slow to answer, and men cannot wait upon prayer alone. As midnight tolled, Rhaena slipped from her chamber down quiet corridors of quarried stone until she reached the godswood. There she knelt before the heart tree, its pale bark bleeding crimson sap, its carved face watching eternity. "I swear," she whispered, silver blonde hair spilling over furs, "I will be the bridge between my blood and his. Fire will not burn him, ice will not freeze me. Let the pact live in us." Snowflakes kissed her lashes. Then came a soft crunch of boots. Roderick emerged, wrapped in a cloak too large for him, carrying a small lantern. He knelt beside her without word, and together they lingered in silence while the red leaves whispered secrets. High above, on the battlements, Aegon watched the children, their twin shadows cast long by moonlight and flame. Visenya stood beside him, dark sister across her back. She spoke without turning. "You know what it means, brother? Those two. They are more than heirs. They are the hinge upon which our world may turn." Aegon's breath steamed. "Enki." The king exhaled a slow breath that plumed and twisted away on the high wind. "I know," he answered at last. "Every conquest before this, every castle burned or bent, was but prologue. The real war waits in the dark, and two children who have not yet shed all their milk teeth sit at its crossroads." Visenya leaned her elbows on the icy merlin, the black silk of her hair whipping over pale cheeks. "Then guard them. Guard them as fiercely as we guard the realm." Nor. Aegon's violet gaze tracked Roderick's lantern bobbing beneath the boughs until the flame vanished behind a curtain of red leaves. "I shall," he murmured, and in the depth of his voice lay the promise of a dragon's fury. The dawn that followed broke like a thin blade of copper between stormcloud and snowfield. Horns sounded across Winterfell's courtyards, summoning men to saddle and smiths to anvil. In the shadow of the great hall, Balerion's furnace roar rolled out with each breath, turning drift to mist. Meraxes and Vhagar crouched close beside him, mantling wings to trap their own heat. Aegon mounted first, the spiked armor of Valyria glinting pale as dawnlight. Rhaenys swung lightly onto Meraxes, braids tucked beneath a silver helm. Visenya clambered quick as a cat onto Vhagar, dark sister strapped along her spine. Torrhen watched, the curl of his beard rimmed white, before stepping back to clasp forearms with Brandon's snow. "Hold Winterfell," Torrhen commanded. "If shadows come while I'm away, light every tower." Brandon's gray eyes reflected dragonfire and iron oath alike. "And you, brother? Come back alive, or not at all?" Torrhen allowed himself a thin smile, then turned to Roderick and Rhaena, who waited at the stables with the dire wolf pups they had taken to raising. The pups, one smoky gray she-wolf Rhaena called Ashes, one white runt Roderick named Ember, snuffled the straw, unconcerned by the approaching chaos. "Guard each other," Torrhen instructed, bending to clasp both their shoulders. "Learn all you can from Maester Harmon, and obey Brandon. He commands in my stead." "Then?" Roderick flushed with importance. Rhaena inclined her head like a born princess, yet her fingers found Roderick's and squeezed hard. Torrhen saw it and felt a strange peace despite the dread curling like a frozen snake in his gut. Without another word, he strode to the yard where his destrier waited, sable cloak snapping around his boots. In a thunder of wing and hoof, the party departed. Torrhen Stark under a banner of direwolf and dragon, flanked by 500 mounted spears and a dozen supply wagons laden with cumbersome black chests, filled with dragonglass. Overhead the dragons rose, beating for the northern sky in a widening spiral. Balerion's passage raked a trench in the clouds that bled pale sunlight across the snowscape. Children atop Winterfell's walls cheered, voices thin and bright. Old men pressed knotted hands to knotted hearts, praying that the ancestors approved of such company. The march north was slow, every mile dogged by snow squalls and the treacherous graystone roads that wound through the Wolf's Wood. But the true hardship came when the party reached the banks of the last river. There they found the crossing, choked by floes of filthy ice, streaked with something blacker than silt. A congealed tar that smelled of death. Torhin rode to the water's edge, nostrils flaring. He dipped a gauntleted finger, brought up a smear that clung like pitch. "The river runs sick," he muttered. Sarah Craig and Umber, massive shoulders lost in a bearskin cloak, spat into the snow. "Saw a thing like that once, my lord, when a whale rotted upriver and fouled the tributary." "Not whale's blood," Torrin said. "Look." A section of ice bobbed close. Frozen within were fish, trout, perch. All shriveled, eyes burst, scales leached of color. Rigid beneath them, Torhin spied a human hand, flesh already paling to the hue of curdled milk. "Burn it," he ordered. "No man drinks from this river. Melt snow for water, and be wary of every pool." Even as men hacked down saplings for torches, a shriek split the overcast. High overhead, Vhagar banked, purple flame spilling from her maw in a startling gout that evaporated falling snow. Visenya signaled to recall the scouts. Moments later, a pair of outriders galloped in. Their mounts were lathered, their faces stark. "Your Grace." The forest ahead. Shadows moving against the wind. A dozen at least. Torrin's jaw clenched. He lifted a horn and blew 2 notes, alert and gather. Across the camp, warriors formed shield walls, spearheads bristling. Balerian's silhouette wheeled once and descended to the tree line like night incarnate. Aegon's voice boomed from the saddle. "Stand fast." The first of the shadows emerged as a ragged line of corpses. Their skin gleamed with frost, lips split to reveal blackened gums. They advanced in jerks and shambles, yet their eyes, pale blue and pitiless, never wavered from the living. The Northmen balked, but the dragons arrived in the same heartbeat. Meraxes screamed, white flames surging to engulf the front ranks of dead. They ignited like dry kindling, collapsing to glowing ruin. But farther back, amid the trunks, taller shapes moved. Others, their armor pale as moonlit ice, their swords slender shards of frozen starlight. Visenya leaned low and let Vhagar's fire strafe the ground, sculpting molten trenches. Aegon called words in High Valyrian, and Balerion answered with a curtain of midnight flame that sucked all color from the air. Snow turned to rain above the inferno. Steam roiled and froze in rime. Yet when the smoke parted, 3 others still stood, blades raised, their visors mirroring the dragon's fires, without a hint of fear. One lifted a hand. Frost gusted outward in a visible wave. The dragons recoiled, scales cracking with sudden chill. "Now!" Torrin roared. Archers loosed arrows tipped with dragon glass. They hissed through the steaming air and struck true. 2 shattered against crystalline armor, but one found a gap at the throat of the lead other. The sapphire eyes dimmed. The creature blew apart into crystal dust. The remaining 2 glided back into shadow, retreating with eerie grace, and in moments the forest swallowed them. An awful hush followed. Hissing embers cooled on iron, and the snow returned, soft, insidious, laying a white shroud over scorched corpses. Rhaenys descended, helm tucked beneath her arm, expression set like flint. "They know our fire," she said quietly to Aegon. "They have some trick to blunt it." Aegon's brows knotted. "We will find a counter-trick. Fire and glass both." Torrin knelt beside the shattered dust that had been the Ice Knight. He lifted a flake the size of a fingernail, transparent, yet faintly alive with flickers of internal cold. "Glass stops them," he whispered. "But numbers may yet prove our undoing." At Eastwatch by the sea, the wall rose in a colossal white arc against a slate sky. Frozen spray from the Bay of Seals glazed its easternmost mile in a glimmering rind that caught what little sun remained. Men on the battlements raised horns when they spotted 3 dragons closing from the south. but fear sank many to their knees. Only the Lord Commander himself held his ground. Jor Harding was gaunt, cheeks carved of stormwood, eyes raw with sleepless nights. He met Torrin on the ice parapet with a grim salute. "You bring the devils of Valyria," he rasped. "Thank the gods. We've devils of our own." From that height, the haunted forest unfurled westward like a black sea. In its depths, faint pinpricks of blue smoldered where dead things wandered. Closer, at the wall's base, Harding gestured toward a stretch of newly piled corpses. Wildlings, rangers, snow-bear deer, stacked in a grotesque barrier. Some still writhed, pinned by quarrels. "Burn them nightly," Harding said, voice ragged. "Still they return. The cold clutches the bones and stands them back up." Torrin stared, jaw set. Aegon's dragons circled overhead, yet even their looming presence seemed small beside that endless forest of creeping night. "When do they march?" Aegon asked. Harding's laugh rattled like loose ice. "When they're ready, or when we blink." Visenya pressed gloved fingertips to the black ice of the Merlin, gaze far away. "Then we must not blink." Plans formed quickly. Rhaenys proposed a firebreak 3 leagues south of the wall. Dragons would burn a wide, curving scar through the trees, while men would line the open ground with trenches of oil and pitch and concealed dragonglass caltrops. Torrin added that every ranger station west to the Shadow Tower should signal the approach of any white mass large enough to blot the snow. "Let them come at us," he declared. "We choose the ground, we choose the moment." That night, the host encamped beneath the wall's looming face. Balerion clung to the ice like a gargantuan bat, wings folded tight. Small folk cowered against wagons but carried out their duties. Boiling oats, oiling bowstrings, sharpening the stores of obsidian. Songs were few, but fires were bright. Men stared into them as if trying to memorize living flame. Within a command tent of stitched polar bear hides, Aegon and Torhin pored over runic etchings smuggled from the crypts of Winterfell, records of Bran the Builder's bindings. Maester Harmon translated, sweat beading on his brow despite the cold. "Where ice meets fire, bind spirit to stone," he read. "Blood of the land, blood of the dragon, sealed by the breath of winter." Visenya frowned. "Sounds like sorcerer's babble." "Maybe," Aegon said. "But I have dragon's breath aplenty, and Torhin has blood of the land." Torrin's brows rose. "You mean to weave new magic?" "A hedge against theirs," Aegon replied. "A last shield if flames fail. At dawn Balerion and I will carve a circle of fire in the forest, and leave runic pillars of dragonglass at its edge. You will chant the words of the first men. Let old and new power marry." Torrin studied the Valyrian king. "You gamble much." Aegon smiled thinly. "I always have." Dawn's pale glow found Rhaena and Roderick perched on Eastwatch's inner wall, cloaks pulled tight. They watched as Balerion lumbered from his perch and launched into the rose-tinged sky, Aegon a dark mote on his neck. Vagar and Meraxes followed. The dragons swept low over the treetops, flames spraying in overlapping arcs. Trees erupted, sap exploding, snow turning instant to rain that hissed in clouds of scorched steam. The children gasped as a ribbon of orange serpented across the wilderness, drawing a colossal crescent line from the coast westward. When the dragons returned, steam still rose from their scales despite the biting air. Aegon dismounted, face flushed, eyes shining with exertion, and something like awe. Torrin appeared with a retinue of green-cloaked shamans, descendants of the first men who still kept the old ways in lonely timber halls. They bore clay bowls of weirwood sap, mixed with powdered obsidian. Within the smoldering clearing, they placed pillars of raw dragonglass, each etched with runes, both Valyrian and First Men script. Aegon inhaled and exhaled a narrow jet of flame through parted lips, hot enough to fuse sap to glass, sealing runes beneath a glossy skin. Torrin sliced his palm and daubed blood across each pillar, murmuring prayers older than any sept. Wind howled. Snow danced in frantic eddies beyond the charred boundary, but would not cross. A hush settled, as if the forest listened. That night, silence broke. A horn blast, 3 notes, shivered across camp. White shadows sighted. Men scrambled. Torrhen snatched his helm, shouting orders. Dragons took wing in seconds, but the dead were faster than anyone guessed. From the tree line poured a river of corpses. Wildling clans, Night's Watch deserters. Ancient bones scoured up from barrow mounds. At their head glided 24 others, astride mounts of icy muscle, and breath like morning fog. They struck the firebreak boundary, and recoiled. The air itself shimmered, as if an unseen wall had risen. Frost rippled along its surface but could not penetrate. The lead other raised a crystal lance and hurled it. The lance struck the invisible barrier and burst into shards of hoarfrost. Shrill, almost human rage echoed from beneath its horned helm. Dragons roared, flames blanketing the ground beyond the barrier, turning the nearest wights to ash that swirled in the updraft. Yet further back, the dead heaped upon themselves, their bodies piling to create an insulated berm of scorched carcasses across which others crawled, shielded from flame by their own burning kin. Visenya cursed and wheeled Vagar to rake them with a second pass, but the tactic repeated. Bodies stacked, flame suppressed by the sheer mass of dead flesh. "Archers!" Torrhen cried. Obsidian arrows streaked, cutting down the first ranks, yet more filled their place. The barrier cracked as an other pressed a gleaming palm against it, ice spider webbing across unseen glass. Aegon barked a string of high Valyrian syllables. Balerion exhaled black fire concentrated as a spear. It struck the trespassing other full in the torso, and for a heartbeat, the creature shone incandescent. Then it burst, crystalline fragments scattering like jeweled hail. The crack healed. Still, the dead climbed. Thunderous booms shook the air as Isofield's siege weapons. Massive bows fashioned of frozen sinew. Launched javelins tipped in something blue and burning coal. One pierced Merax's shoulder. She shrieked and veered, blood hissing in steam. Rhaenys clung hard, but kept her seat, guiding the wounded dragon back toward the wall's relative safety. On the battlements, Roderick watched in horror. Knuckles white on the stone. Aegon cursed. Their weapons grow bold. He spurred Balerion lower, bathing the siege crews in molten shadow, melting bowstrings and frozen limbs alike. Even so, the tide pressed nearer. Wights reached the barrier's threshold and battered with frozen axes. Axe heads shattered scorching to slag, but newer ones replaced them. Ice giants lumbered forward, ancient beings of frost, tall as watchtowers, with horns of frozen root curling back from skulls of rime. They clubbed the barrier with limbs like living glaciers. The ground quaked. Torrhen knew the enchantment would not hold. He signaled. Reserve companies under Lord Morse Karstark advanced from hidden trenches, shields locked, spears tipped in obsidian. "Hold the line," Morse thundered. "For winter in the wall." Steel rang like bells, obsidian pierced frozen flesh. Ragged cheers rose, but little by little the Northerners lost ground. Each man who fell rose moments later behind Northern lines, blade still in hand, eyes pale with remorseless chill. Roderick saw it. Panic twisted in his gut, but beside him, Rhaena's hand found his. "We fight," she whispered. Ember the white pup yipped, sensing his terror. "I have no sword," Roderick gasped. Rhaena reached beneath her cloak. There, concealed since Winterfell, lay a slender dagger of Valyrian steel. The gift Visenya had pressed into her palm that morning. "Take it." He swallowed. "Valyrian steel kills them." "Then kill them," she said. Together, they descended a rope ladder to the courtyard where chaos reigned as trembling stable boys thrust spears into risen grooms. The direwolf pups darted at their heels, fur bristling. Roderick's first test came swift. A Night's Watch brother, face half-eaten, lurched toward a smith's apprentice. Roderick lunged, the Valyrian blade glimmering. With surprising ease, the steel parted icy vertebrae. The corpse fell lifeless. This time it stayed. Rhaena grabbed a fallen crossbow, loaded it with dragonglass quarrels. She sighted upward and loosed at a wight scrambling over the barricades. The bolt punched clean through skull. The body collapsed atop comrades, momentarily clogging the breach. "Good," she murmured. Again. Around them, the defense rallied. Seeing signs of Stark and Targaryen in the thick of blood stirred the Northmen's hearts. New lines formed. Horns blared the wolf call. Yet outside the barrier, an ice giant persisted, hammering cracks into the runic ward. Each blow sent fractures of azure light, squirting through the air. Aegon recognized the peril, but Merax's wound had grounded her. Only Balerion and Vhagar remained aloft. He spurred Balerion high, then Dove. Wings folded, jaws yawning wide with a roar that rattled internal organs. Black fire poured, striking the giant's torso. Ice flash vaporized, and the behemoth shattered. But the concussion of the blast rippled outward and rent the weakened barrier. A roar of shattering glass, unseen yet felt in marrow, swept camp. Cold flooded in, a palpable entity. As if the night itself breathed. The others advanced with new fury, their swords blazing cold light. One leapt onto the carcass berm and sprang into the trenches. Northmen faltered, until Torhin himself intercepted. Greatsword alive with runes. Steel met ice, sparks of frost and flame erupted. Torhin parried a downstroke that numbed his arms, then swung low. The other's knee shattered. Torhin's follow-through decapitated. The creature exploded into rime. Cheer rose, but quickly died. A second giant plowed through the breach. Roderick and Rhaena stood side by side near the burning carcass mound. The giant's shadow swept over them. Rhaena's face drained of color, yet she set a fresh bolt. "Roderick," she breathed. "The eyes." The giant's eyes glowed cold fire. Roderick gripped the Valyrian dagger reverse hand and dashed toward a tangle of supply ropes, anchor spiked to the berm. He slashed the line, and a tall timber spar, formerly a signal mast, toppled. Its tar-drenched banners blazing as they struck a torch pit. The flaming mast crashed across the giant's shoulders, momentarily staggering it. The colossal figure lurched, bathed in flame, but not undone. Rhaena knelt, aimed, and fired. The dragon glass bolt soared true, embedding in the giant's right eye. The glow flickered, dimmed, fissures webbed from the socket. With a groan like a calving glacier, the giant pitched backward and shattered. The breach, however, remained yawning. A keening horn rose from beyond the trees, and others called to rally. Whites surged anew. Aegon spurred Balerion, but the great dragon was tiring. Flames sputtered less fierce. Visenya and Vhagar had been drawn westward by another flank assault, their roar distant. Torrhen's lungs burned. He lifted his horn and sounded 4 quick notes. Fall back to second line. Men withdrew in disciplined retreat behind oil-filled trenches, which sappers now ignited. A wall of flame snapped up, hiding the barrier gap. But flame alone could not win the day. Aegon landed amid swirling cinders, helm scorched, beard singed. Torrhen met him. "We cannot hold through the night," Torrhen said, voice hoarse. Aegon glanced to the wall looming behind them. "Then we do not." Torrhen's eyes widened. "You mean to abandon Eastwatch?" "Not abandon, sacrifice," Aegon answered. His gaze roamed the battlements, his mind racing. "The wall's magic remains unbroken. The breach is in our ward only. If we collapse the far edge of the firebreak, channel the dead north and east, then break that section of ice ourselves." Torrhen grasped his intent. "We turn the wall into a trap. Seal them in the cul-de-sac between wall and sea, and then drown them," Aegon finished. "Or bury them under ice. Risky." Torrhen's breath steamed. "But perhaps our only hope." Within minutes, horns blared. Engineers dragged kegs of wildfire, Aegon's southern cargo, untested and cold, toward the foot of the wall. Atop Balerion, Aegon would ignite the charges at the precise moment the enemy swarm filled the narrow beach between wall and surf. Rhaenys returned, astride limping Meraxes, face grim, but resolute. Visenya regrouped with Vhagar. Blood splattered across one cheek, Dark Sister notched near the tip. "The western flank holds barely," she reported. They will come hard when they sense our consolidating. Then we give them the scent, Rhaenys said, eyes alight. Meraxes and I will draw them. Aegon opened his mouth to protest. She silenced him with a look that brooked no refusal. Meraxes rumbled agreement, despite the oozing wound. Twilight bled into black, but torchlight and dragonflame painted the snow a molten orange. Rhaenys streaked low over the tree line, Meraxes' wounded shoulder leaving a trail of glowing droplets that sizzled where they fell. She roared, a challenge that echoed for leagues. The dead responded. Like an enormous tide, they swept from the ruined firebreak, drawn by heat and sound. Others on ice stallions rode at their flanks, pale standards whipping. Behind them, northern defenders withdrew through a narrow gate at Eastwatch's base, sealing iron portcullises. Upon the seaward ice shelf, barrels of wildfire were stacked in a crescent hugging the wall's foundation, green liquid sloshing malevolently. Aegon waited on Balerion directly above the cache, sword raised. Torrhen stood on the battlements, ready to issue the final horn blast. Roderick and Rhaena watched from a high tower, their pups huddled between them. The enormity of it dazzled and terrified them. The dead poured across the beach, wading into knee-deep surf, eyes glowing beneath auroral moonlight. Ice giants waded too, shoulder-deep, forging a path by freezing water around their limbs. Closer, Torrhen whispered, fist clenched around the horn. Then a scream, a living one, echoed from the western parapet. A white walker had vaulted the flame trench earlier unseen, scaling the wall itself with spider-like ease. Now it burst onto the height, blade whistling. Men fell like wheat. It carved toward Torrhen. Roderick's heart seized. Father! He bolted for the stairs, Rhaena at his side. They met the creature halfway along the parapet. Torrhen grappled with it, parrying icy blade with runed steel. But frost crept along his sword, sapping metal and muscle. Roderick lunged. The Valyrian dagger punched beneath the walker's arm and into what would be its lung. Frost exploded, launching Roderick back against stone. Torrhen caught his son as the creature shattered, shards tinkling down the stairs. Breathing hard, he looked into Roderick's wild eyes. "The horn," Roderick rasped. Torrhen nodded, stumbled back to the Merlin, and blew a single tremulous note. Aegon heard. He sheathed his sword and leaned forward. Balerion engulfed the wildfire cache in ebony flame. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the world turned green. Wildfire erupted along the crescent, gouts of incandescent jade leaping 30 feet, searing wall and sea alike. The trapped army of dead vanished beneath a maelstrom of unnatural flame. Ice giants melted like wax. Whites burst like grisly fireworks. Steam vaulted skyward, condensing to freezing fog that rolled back across the wall in waves. Balerion rose, wings scorched by backblast, but held aloft. Aegon guided him clear as shockwaves rippled through ice. Cracks spidered outward. The entire shelf began to calve. Massive slabs shearing into the sea, carrying burning dead into black depths. Torrhen and those on the parapet staggered from the tremor. A sound like 1,000 thunderclaps followed. The wall's eastern mile cleaved and crashed seaward, burying flames and corpses beneath titanic blocks of ice. Silence then, a silence profound, broken only by the hiss of steam rising from dark water. Roderick stared, unable to comprehend the scale. Rhaena squeezed his hand until pain broke the spell. "It worked," she whispered. "For now," Roderick answered, voice husky. In the days that followed, the living counted losses, and the dead lay buried beneath frozen seas. Scouts reported the haunted forest eerily still, blue eyes absent from shadow. Yet no one believed the war done. They had won a reprieve, nothing more. A council convened in Eastwatch's repaired hall, its roof patched with fresh pine. Torrhen, still limping from a twisted ankle, stood beside Aegon. Rhaenys' arm rested in a sling. Meraxes was grounded, healing. Visenya's face carried a fresh scar from flying debris. "We sealed the breach," Aegon said, voice rough. "But the enemy is not defeated. They will test us again. Elsewhere, elsewhen." Torrhen nodded. Our ward spells hold only this stretch. The wildlings say ice spiders big as hounds roam higher west. We need more pillars, more dragons, and more men. Aegon turned to his sisters. Visenya, ride south with Vagardorsh. Summon the armies of the Reach and the Stormlands. Rhaenys, once healed, take Meraxes to Dragonstone. Have the maesters forge new wildfire, mixed with obsidian dust. If we must crack every mile of coast to drown them again, we will. Dan? And you? Visenya asked. I stay, Aegon replied. The North accepted our pact. I will honor it in vigilance. Rhaenys' gaze softened on him. Take care, brother. He smiled faintly, then addressed Torrhen. Together, we shall forge a bastion no knight can breach. Torrhen extended his forearm. Together, he said, clasping wrists. Outside, Roderick and Rhaena walked the ramparts. The pups trotted ahead, tails wagging in the fragile sun. Below them lay the frozen sea, shattered and refrozen, a jagged scar of green glass at its heart. It shimmered in morning light like a gemstone in iron setting. Do you think this will be remembered? Roderick asked, voice still boyish yet carrying new weight. Rhaena considered. By some, perhaps, she answered. Stories fade. Stones endure. Roderick frowned, following her gaze to the wall. Stones can fall. Then we build them stronger, she said, and smiled. Far above, Balerion perched atop the rebuilt gate tower, wings mantled. His shadow enveloped the children as they walked. Wolf and dragon, side by side. Clouds scudded overhead, pale and swift, but the sun broke through, warm on their faces. For a fleeting moment, all was quiet. No rustle of dead leaves, no distant horns, only the sea's sigh against ice. Rhaena pressed her palm to Roderick's. The pact lives, she whispered. And so do we, he replied. In the hush that followed, ember and ashes raised their muzzles and howled. A strangely matched duet that climbed the vault of sky and lingered, defiant, over the silent, broken night beyond the world of living flame. Snow melted into slush where dragonfire had kissed it, exposing dark earth beneath. The promise of spring, though the calendar still named it winter. Men set timbers, mended walls, trained with obsidian blades. Maesters traced new maps, marking charred crescents and submerged deadlands. Children chased each other across the yard, pretending to be dragons and giants. In the solar at Eastwatch, Maester Harmond dipped quill to inkstone and began a new chronicle. He wrote of the pact sealed by winter's blood and dragon's fire, of the day ice giants drowned in green flame, of children who stood beneath collapsing sky and did not flee. His hand shook, but he wrote, In the forging of this alliance, I see not only the saving of one night, but the dawn of an age unimagined, where sons of winter ride dragons and daughters of flame wear wolf pelts. May the gods, old and new, grant that such unity endures beyond the snows of time. Shan. He paused, listening to distant laughter echo through stone, mingled with the rust hum of forges and the guttural rumble of one immense dragon yawning on the parapet. For the first time in many moons, Harmon dared to believe that men might yet survive the long night, not by hiding behind walls of ice, nor by praying to gods in fearful silence, but by standing in the open shoulder to shoulder, hearts blazing bright as dragon flame against the dark. Outside, as afternoon light burned gold across the white shore, Aegon the Conqueror, now Aegon the Guardian, paced the wall's crown beside Torrhen Stark. They spoke little. Words were unnecessary between oath brothers who had watched death itself break upon their chosen line. At length Aegon turned, surveying the realm stretched beyond. Forests in distant thaw, rivers flickering like quicksilver threads, mountain crowns ghost blue on the horizon. We have carved a wound in winter, he said, voice soft. And winter will scar, Torrhen replied, but scars remind a body it has survived. Aegon nodded. Then let us see it survive yet again. They stood together, gazing north where storm clouds brooded, until the sun dipped and shadows lengthened. Two silhouettes upon a wall of ancient sorcery, guarding the borders of story and silence. Below, Roderick and Rhaena watched them from the courtyard, feeling something vast settle in their chests. Not fear, not pride, but the certain knowledge that history had bent, and they with it, into a shape neither dragon nor wolf could have walked alone. They clasped hands, and in that simple act, the pact breathed, alive, unbroken, enduring beyond the snows of time. Kya, Ik. Snowmelt trickled in silver threads down the face of the wall, carving tiny runnels that caught the late morning sun in glittering fragments. Each droplet, Torrhen Stark thought, carried a story, a memory of winter's dominion slipping away grain by grain. He stood on the parapet, gloved hands resting on rough ice that had witnessed more years than any maester's reckoning, and let the faint warmth seep into his bones. Below, the ruins of the eastern buttress lay sealed beneath refrozen slabs, a jagged mausoleum entombing the fallen dead. Somewhere under that riven crust, the green phantoms of wildfire still glowed, hazed by frost and salt. The world was quiet now, but it was the taut stillness of an archer's draw rather than peace. Ravens wheeled in lazy gyres over the black scar of the drowned beach. Their croaks drifted on air sharp with brine and char. Beyond the firebreak's ash-striped crescent, the haunted forest stretched away in a hush so profound that even the wind seemed reluctant to stir its branches. The enemy had recoiled into that hushed wilderness, wounded but alive, and Torrhen could almost feel their cold regard. The next assault would come in its own time. Footsteps approached, crunching lightly on hoarfrost. Aegon Targaryen drew alongside, his shadow lengthening in the thin sun. He wore no crown this morning, only a cloak of direwolf gray lined in jet-black sable. The clasp was obsidian shaped like a three-headed dragon, fused by dragonfire the night before. A token of esteem, Torrhen realized, a binding of their sigils in simple metal and stone. "Eastwatch breathes again," Aegon murmured. His eyes followed a squad of builders craning a new timber brace into place along a cracked merlon. But a cracked lung heals easier than a broken spine. "We have mended 1 mile of wall, 98 remain to test us. Stone and ice we can shore," Torrhen said. "Men and will are the brittle parts." Aegon's mouth curved in a wry line. "Then we must temper them with purpose." Purpose, Torrhen reflected, had become both sword and shield. The battle had kindled a fierce unity among Northmen and Southerners alike, yet unity was a fire that required tending lest it gutter in the chill of old suspicions. Already he had heard grumblings among the Black Brothers, fears that dragons would claim the Night's Watch for their own wars, doubts that the Pact of Heirs truly served the Watch's vow. From the south had come ravens filled with worry. The Reach feared wolves at court, the Riverlands feared wildfire near their grain fields, and Old Town whispered that Valyrian godlessness stalked the north. Above it all loomed the faith of the Seven, uneasy at talk of blood magic woven by First Men shamans. "We temper them," Torrhen echoed. "But steel can shatter if hammered too hard." Aegon considered that in silence. Below, a pair of giant sledges rumbled through the gate, hauled by shaggy northern aurochs. Each carried cylindrical boulders of polished dragonglass quarried from the caves of Dragonstone. Rhaenys and Visenya had returned at dawn with a flotilla of supply ships, braving pack ice and treacherous reefs to disgorge crates of wildfire, bundles of Valyrian parchment, and chests of glass gleaming deep violet. The sledges crawled like beetles across the bleak yard, bound for storehouses freshly carved in the wall's base. Aegon's gaze lingered on them. "We forged an empire with swords and fear, Torrhen. Swords alone will not hold back this cold, nor will fear. We must forge faith." Namnor cities. "In whom? The gods? Each realm prays to its own." "In us," Aegon said simply. "In the Pact." His tone carried a quiet conviction that reminded Torrhen why kings followed him across oceans of flame. Let them see wolf and dragon standing here together, working, eating, bleeding. Let them see children of both houses sit in a single classroom, drill in the same yard. Let them see Balerion roost on the wall without devouring the sheep of small folk. Then grumblings will soften into wonder. Torrhen nodded, though doubt prickled. Wonder was fickle. People awed today might fear tomorrow. Yet he had pledged the North to this path, and there could be no turning. They descended the ice stair together, boots clacking on stone steps hewed generations ago by mauls of granite and frozen sweat. In the yard, Roderick and Rhaena practiced with wooden wasters, beneath Brandon Snow's watchful eye. Their forms were uneven. Roderick's shoulders hunched in raw determination, Rhaena's wrists too stiff. But they moved with a mirrored cadence that hinted at deeper harmony. Nearby their direwolf pups, no longer pups at all, but lanky adolescents, bounded after each other, ashes snapping at Ember's tail in teasing lunges. Brandon spotted the kings and barked commands. Roderick saluted, beaming, cheeks flushed from the cold. Rhaena curtsied with unstudied grace, then asked Brandon for permission to resume a footwork drill. The wildling captive who served as their dialect tutor lounged against a post, amused. "They grow," Aegon remarked. "Outward and in," Torrhen said. A horn blast rang from the seaward watchtower. One note, scout returning. All eyes turned toward the pier, where a longboat rode through floating bergs toward the quay. At its prow stood Ser Garmon Hightower, white cloak fluttering, hair silvered by frost. He leapt ashore, boots splashing brine, and strode up the ramp, torchlight tremoring in his steel. "My lords," he announced, bowing. "The fleet is sighted. Lord Tyrell's banners fly with Stormlander pennants. 10,000 men sail behind, bearing grain and tents. They will anchor before dusk." A relieved murmur rippled through the yard. Supplies meant strength. Strength meant hope. Torrhen clapped his gauntlet on Garmon's shoulder in thanks. Aegon issued brisk orders. "Clear dock space, gather scribes for quartermaster tallies, prepare barracks." By sundown, the harbor at Eastwatch smoldered with activity. Tall cogs of the arbor nudged aside squat nars of White Harbor, their decks stacked with barrels of apples and casks of fiery summer wine. War galleys from Storm's End unfurled bright pennants painted with yellow stags and crowned lions. Long lines of troops disembarked, breath steaming, sandals slipping on ice-slick planks. Marched inland, they found themselves billeted under watchful black brothers who barked regulations older than the Andal conquest. Torrhen toured the makeshift camp with Lord Willem Tyrell, a florid man whose cheeks reddened at every puff of cold. Willem complained gently about frostbite, but his men set about trenching latrines and erecting cookfires without needing command. Farther along, the Stormlanders drilled silently. Grim, sea-salt men who traded banter for stoic competence. Sir Courtney Baratheon, leading them, saluted Torrhen with curt deference and moved on. At the far fringe of camp, Torrhen found Roderick and Rhaena delivering steaming bowls of oat stew to newly arrived archers from the Dornish marches. The children served politely, scattering smiles like torch sparks. Grins answered them. Torrhen watched invisible threads stitch north to south in those fleeting exchanges. Perhaps Aegon was right. Faith could be hammered like steel, each simple courtesy a deliberate stroke. Night came crystal clear, stars pricking heaven like spilled salt. In the officers' hall, carved hastily from pine and black ice mortar, Aegon convened war council. Lords Tyrell and Baratheon joined Torrhen, Jor Harding and Maester Harmon de Tuohy. Rhaenys and Visenya flanked Aegon at the head of the table, dark eyes reflecting lamplight. Scrolls unfurled. Maps of every valley north of the Neck, sketches of the wall's hidden tunnels, lists of castles still loyal. Harmond produced charcoal rubbings of ancient glyphs from the Night Fort's sealed vaults. Rhaenys laid a slender finger upon one, a spiral of crescents surrounding a sword. "The children wrote of a gate of dawn hidden in ice," she said softly. "If true, the others may seek it." Visenya frowned. "A gate in the wall? We barely patched one hole. Another could undo us." Jor Harding spoke, voice sandpapered by cold. "Legends place many secrets in the wall's heart. Ghost tunnels, ice chambers, wells of black water. Few living have ventured deep." Aegon steepled his hands. "Then we must. I propose an exploratory party. Small, swift, half-sworn brothers who know every rat run, half our own sorcerers." Torrhen stiffened. Sorcerers? Shamans of the first men, Aegon clarified. And Valyrian pyromancers, Rhaenys, brought from Dragonstone. If the wall hides power, we must learn its language before our enemy does. Yet and how? Torrhen's mind leapt to the distrust sown by southern whispers, dragon sorcery defiling sacred ice. Yet grudgingly he saw the sense. I will send Brandon Snow, he agreed. He learned every secret stair as a boy climbing where even I forbade. Visenya volunteered herself, eyes bright with anticipation. Dark Sister likes forgotten passages. Rhaenys placed a scroll on the map. An inventory of wildfire sealed in iron casks. If you find a weak point, we can reinforce with fused lava glass. Dragonfire bonds to ice, stronger than mortar. Navirandarar. Lord Tyrell murmured about costs. Sir Courtney inquired about structural integrity. Aegon answered patiently, weaving plans until lamplight burned low and parchment curled from heat. Balerian's roar greeted dawn, reverberating through timber bones of every hut. The great dragon crouched in the yard, a black pyre of scales, while pyromancers ladled viscous resin into bronze canisters strapped along his flank. Experimental incendiaries designed to detonate on impact and glaze ice with molten glass. Rhaenys supervised the process, murmuring in High Valyrian, gentle with the beast. On the wall's east stair, Visenya, Brandon Snow, and a cadre of 5 knights watch rangers prepared to descend an ancient postern discovered in crumbling records. They carried ropes, lanterns, satchels of dragonglass dust, and for Visenya a slim bundle containing Dark Sister wrapped in sealskin. Roderick and Rhaena, watching from the gatehouse as the party vanished beyond a frost-clogged archway, felt a shiver, unrelated to the temperature. Adventure beckoned, but duty held them here. For now. Tasks pressed upon them even at their young age. Under Maester Harmond, they studied the dialects of the North's tribes, Valyrian runes, and tactics of ice warfare. Under Brandon's second, Sir Rendell Talhart, they drilled with blunted axes and shields heavier than their arms liked. They were heirs to more than castles now. They were heirs to the safety of half a continent. One afternoon, while scribing rune variations, Rhaena paused, quills suspended. Roderick, she said, when dragons and wolves share a future whose gods answer prayers. Roderick chewed his lip. He had knelt before weirwoods and lit candles in the sept his mother kept. He had heard sailors call on the drowned god and free folk on the nameless spirits of stone. Maybe all of them? He ventured. Maybe the gods are like us, arguing, but together when it matters. Rhaena smiled, ink dotting her knuckle. Then I shall pray to all and none. Their quiet nook overlooked the training field where Stormlander's spearmen and Karstark levies practiced rank maneuvers. Suddenly, a Karstark man toppled, convulsing. Roderick and Rhaena rushed down, finding his lips blue, pupils glassy. Maester Harmond confirmed poison. Tainted snow melted for drink. Within hours, 3 more men collapsed. Panic rippled. Torrhen ordered water supplies checked. Aegon dispatched Inquisitor spies among the camp. In the mess hall, rumors bloomed. The Dornish poisoned wells. The Watch resented southern presence. Pyromancers angered the old gods. That night, Rhaena dreamed of serpents coiling in water barrels, their scales pale as moonlit ice. She woke with sweat, chilling her spine. By torchlight, she crept to the storage yard. Roderick trailing, ember and ashes padding behind. They tested barrel after barrel, sniffing, tasting icy slush. At last, near the Targaryen supply depot, ashes snarled, hackles high. The water smelled faintly of almonds. Roderick fetched Torrhen, who arrived with Aegon and Maester Harmond. The Maester's kit confirmed it. A distillation of nightshade and winterbane, potent enough to kill slowly with ice-burning agony. Saboteurs, Torrhen growled. But whose? Aegon's expression hardened. Not the Watch. They would strike direct. Someone seeks to seed distrust. Dornish? Unsure. The timing, just as our armies arrive. Then he summoned Captain Kreese, the spy master. and whispered instructions. A web of silent watchers spread by dawn, eyes in every cook fire, ears in every barracks. Within 2 days, they caught a squire from House Grey Iron, of the Iron Islands, disguised beneath a northern cloak. He had bribed a steward to deposit nightshade bundles. Under interrogation, he spat seawater and curses, claiming Balin Grey Iron served the true king of Winter's Sea. The squire died before naming co-conspirators. But fishermen reported longships lurking beyond pack ice. Sails blazoned with black krakens had fled north under cover of fog. The Ironborn, Torhin realized, scented weakness in war-weary coasts. They would raid provisioning lines, harry supply ships, bleed the war effort dry. Plans shifted. Lord Tyrell offered to dispatch arbor warships to hunt krakens. Sir Courtenay pledged galleys. Aegon agreed, and Torhin dispatched ravens to house Manderley, raise the White Harbor fleet, blockade the shivering sea. Roderick overheard his father's anger and vowed to strengthen harbor patrols. That evening, he and Rhaena walked the piers, counting moorings, noting rotten planks. They spoke to sailors from Gulltown who knew kraken tricks, and to crabbers who swore by tide timetables. Slowly a defense lattice formed in Roderick's youthful mind. Watchtowers at the headlands, beacon chains, sea chain booms across the narrow channel. He sketched it in charcoal and presented to Torhin, who studied with proud surprise. "You think like a steward," he said. "I think like someone who wants our friends safe," Roderick answered. He glanced at Rhaena. "We promised to build stones stronger." Aegon approved the design. Within a fortnight, carpenters raised timber towers on jutting crags, beacon baskets ready to flare. Chainsmiths hammered links thicker than man wrists, each drenched in an alchemical lacquer to resist salt and cold. Youthful ingenuity gained respect. Men saluted when Roderick passed, calling him young wolf of the harbor. Deep within the wall, Visenya's party pressed through cramped passages no man had walked in centuries. Runnels of black water cut channels through blue ice. Phantom breezes sighed down shafts that led who knew where. Their lanterns cast prismatic rainbows on walls that glimmered like crushed gemstones. Sometimes they heard faint, eldritch murmurs, echoes of unknown origin. At each junction, Visenya etched Valyrian glyphs to guide return. Brandon snow marked with charcoal direwolf heads. On the third day, the tunnel widened into a vast hexagonal chamber. Slabs of obsidian formed the floor. Pillars of translucent ice soared overhead, imprisoning shapes that might once have been weirwood roots or serpentine channels of pale crystal. In the center rose a monolith of fused ice and black glass, smooth as water, yet warm to touch. Embedded at its core glowed a spiral like the glyph on Harmon's scroll, brighter than lantern light. Visenya approached, dark sister drawn. The blade vibrated faintly near the monolith, humming resonance that tingled in her teeth. Brandon set palm against the surface. The glow pulsed under his touch. "This is heart ice," he whispered. "Living magic." One of the watch rangers produced a chiseling pick, eager to gather sample. As his steel tip struck, a note like a funeral bell rang through the cavern, and frost raced up the pick's shaft, encasing his arm to the elbow. Visenya cleaved the limb off before ice reached his heart. He stared, bloodless but alive. The arm shattered on stone. No one tried again. They recorded sketches, noted sigils and retreated, sealing the tunnel with a circle of dragonglass dust fused by Visenya's dragon flame. Brandon tasted air near the mouth. It held a whisper of ozone, as if storms brewed within stone. Returning above, they reported their findings. Aegon listened rapt. Harmon scribbled furiously. "Power node," the maester concluded. The children wove the wall's magic through such hearts. Living conduits to bind ice and earth. Could the others fracture them? Aegon asked. "With blade or spell, perhaps," Harmon said. "If they find them first." Thus began the hunt of hearts. Small teams fanned west, guided by Brandon's maps and Visenya's runic lore, to reinforce each heart-ice nexus with dragonglass wards. They found 7 before snows deepened. 1 beneath the Shadow Tower, 1 near Icemark, others beneath abandoned wayforts. At each, Valyrian glyphs joined First Men spirals in uneasy harmony. The wall itself seemed to hum at times, singing faintly under starlight. Autumn slipped toward midwinter again, though by calendar it should have been high summer. Frost returned earlier than men recalled in their lifetimes. Rivers froze shallow yet swift. Game dwindled. The long night pressed its palm upon the land once more. Across the narrow sea, ravens brought grim tidings. Volantine explorers sighted white storms swirling over the shivering sea, unnatural cyclones birthing shards of ice that pierced wooden hulls. In the stepstones, sailors found corpses drifting, eyes blue despite latitudes far south of snow. Panic whispered in port taverns. The cold death crossed oceans. At Eastwatch, Maester Harmond assembled lords, under a tapestry of starlight, and spoke words that chilled blood more than night air. "The winds of winter shift southward," he said. "Our enemy awakens powers older than the wall. Powers that stir the oceans themselves." Aegon set a fist upon the table. "Then we strike before they master storms. We carry the fight north of the wall, burn their nests, shatter their workshops, tear their hearts of ice to dust." Gasps answered him. Lord Tyrell protested supply lines. Jor Harding warned garrisons stretched thin. Torrin listened, silent. Then he stood. "The longer we wait, the stronger they grow," he said softly. "I will lead the vanguard myself. Give me 10,000 spears, 3 dragons, and a moon's stores. We march to the fangs of Frostfangs and draw them out." Rhaenys laid a hand on his arm. "One dragon must guard Eastwatch." "Mirax's remains," Torrin replied. "But Balerion and Vigar will fly with us." Visenya's eyes glittered. A worthy hunt. That night after council, Roderick confronted his father in the solar. Candles guttered, scattering shadows. "You ride beyond the wall," Roderick said, jaw tight. "Take me." Torrin smiled sadly. "Your time will come, pup." Roderick slammed a fist on the map table. "I am heir of Winterfell, and of the Pact. I must learn to fight these foes. Nanaperby." "I need you here," Torrin countered. "You hold Eastwatch should I fall. You must be the wolf who minds the gate." Roderick's shoulders slumped. Rhaena stepped from the doorway, silent until now. "And I will stand with him," she said. "2 heirs, 1 gate. No shadow passes." Torrin looked at them, his blood, and the blood of fire bound to his. Pride and terror waged private war behind his stern gaze. At last he kissed their foreheads and swore to return. Preparations consumed 2 weeks. Forges rang night and day, shaping spearheads of dragonglass tipped with Valyrian steel collars, so they would not shatter on impact. Leatherworkers wrapped hafts in direwolf hide for grip. Blacksmiths etched runes of fire. Rhaena led apprentices in brewing sealed pots of wildfire, infused with powdered crystal from hard ice samples. A concoction Harmon dubbed "sun in a jar." The jars glowed faint green even through steel casings. On the eve of departure, a snowstorm blotted moon and star. Yet in the courtyard lamps blazed on high poles draped in banners of wolf and dragon. 10,000 soldiers stood in muffled rows, faces hidden behind leather masks against the gale. At their head, Torrin mounted a Garin wearing black scale lamellar gifted by Visenya. Aegon climbed to Balerion's neck, a silhouette against swirling white. Visenya and Vigar waited to his flank. Roderick and Rhaena descended the keep steps to bid farewell. Torrin clasped Roderick's forearm, the grip of equals, and handed him a package wrapped in direwolf pelt. Inside lay the Valyrian dagger now set into a short sword forged for Roderick's height. Its pommel a red gold wolf head with garnet eyes. Symbols of both houses spiraled down the fuller. "Guard the gate," Torrin said, "and your heart." He knelt before Rhaena, pressing a ring into her palm. A circlet of glassy black carved in interlocking dragons twining around a tiny embedded direwolf fang. "For luck," he whispered. "For light in darkness." Rhaena swallowed tears, returning the ring to her finger. She whispered something in Valyrian. "Zealot Ixis Nike, a light I am." Torrin smiled. Horns sounded. 3 mellow notes, 1 keening. The army moved. Balerion's wings unfurled. A cathedral of shadow. Fires guttered under the downdraft as he leapt skyward. Vhagar followed, her emerald scales shimmering when lightning flashed within cloud. Below, columns of men advanced through the newly opened breachway, torches bobbing like fireflies in thickening snow. Roderick and Rhaena watched until the last torch vanished beyond the tree line. Silence closed around Eastwatch, deep and foreboding. The storm intensified, snowflakes stinging like sparks. Yet across the ramparts men still worked, tightening bolt heads, checking oil levels in giant scorpions mounted to swiveling towers. Roderick turned to Rhaena. "Now we keep faith." She squeezed his hand. "And build stones stronger." Days bled into weeks. News filtered back on raven wings. Torrhen's host fought skirmishes in valleys where rivers ran black with frozen blood. Balerion's fire melted ice castles inhabited by white shadows. West of the Frostfangs they discovered ghoul pits, great sinkholes where corpses were lowered by sled till animated. Aegon ordered all pits collapsed with dragon flame. Visenya slew an ice worm 3 spear lengths long, its fangs harder than steel. Losses mounted, yet spirits held. At Eastwatch, winter besieged the garrison. Blizzards buried tents, froze hinges, blistered skin through double cloaks. The Ironborn prowled the bay, raiding fisher hamlets. Beacon towers flared crimson, and Roderick's seaboom snapped once under a battering ram prow, but repairs held. Ember and Ashes, now nearly full-grown, led search parties through thigh-deep drifts to find lost sentries, sniffing scent trails invisible to men. One bitter night, an aged ranger named Old Joss returned from a ranging collapsing inside the south tunnel. His hands were charred black as if burned by frost. Clutched in their ruin was an obsidian sickle carved in elegant loops. He gasped that he found it in a cave lined with shimmering ice mirrors and runes of the children. He died before saying more. The sickle radiated faint warmth, though rhymed in frost. Maester Harmond theorized it was a key, fashioned for a gate of dawn. He urged Roderick and Rhaena to study its runes, hoping to unlock secrets. For days they pored over glyphs, comparing to scroll imprints Visenya retrieved. Patterns emerged, spirals nested in crescents, lines intersecting at golden ratios. Rhaena traced her finger along one swirl, and felt a tingle, as if static danced under skin. She pressed harder. The sickle pulsed orange. A hairline glow spread along etched paths, illuminating the characters. Roderick shouted for Harmond, who arrived breathless. As they watched, the sickle's inner edge liquefied into molten glass, then hardened again, now seamless. Harmond declared it newly attuned, responsive to living blood. "Perhaps it opens the true gate," he whispered, heart pounding. A council of captains gathered under torchlight. Some argued to dispatch the sickle to Torrhen, others feared losing it. In the end, Roderick made the decision. He and Rhaena would lead a small party to investigate the nearest hard ice nexus west of Eastwatch, guided by rune clues. Brandon Snow's report suggested safe passages. They would take 20 men, the direwolves, and carry enough wildfire jars to seal any breach. Jor Harding hesitated, 2 heirs risking themselves. But Roderick stood firm. "Heirs must bear weight of their pact," he said. Harding relented. Preparation was swift. Furs, crampons, dragonglass weapons, snowshoes woven of weirwood strips. Rhaena donned a lamellar vest of lacquered pine and bronze, flexible yet light, and tucked the sickle inside a sealskin sheath. Roderick slung his short sword and wore a cloak. Ashes insisted on tugging. The wolf's teeth quickened to join. They left at dawn under a nacreous sky. Snow swirled, but Ember and Ashes broke trail. The party moved silent, save for crunch of shoes and occasional bark of orders. Beyond the firebreak trees whispered in thresholds of sound, their branches cracking like distant bones. Once, shapes flickered between trunks, pale slender, but vanished when crossbows aimed. Midday they paused at a frozen stream. Rhaena knelt, pressing gloved fingers into powdery snow. Beneath lay crust of translucent ice reflecting sun halos. She sensed something, a tremor, almost musical, plucking inside her skull. She beckoned Roderick. Together they followed the subtle pull upstream to where the stream emerged from a low cave mouth beneath a tangle of roots. The cave gaped like a wolf's throat, rimed in hoarfrost. Inside, the air felt warmer, scented with mineral tang. Torches lit. They stepped into a hall of mirrors. Walls of ice so polished, they returned their images in kaleidoscope. Snow-quilted branches above funneled sun into shafts that splintered, flung rainbows across the vault. At the back of the chamber stood a slab of hard ice, smaller than those beneath the wall but alive with the same spiral sign. Before it lay a pedestal of black stone carved like intertwined roots. An indentation matched the curve of the obsidian sickle. Rhaena drew the sickle, palm tinkling where blood pricked earlier. The blade thrummed. She hesitated only a breath, then seated it into the niche. Ice cracked. Delicate, crystalline cracks like spider webs spreading outward. Light burst, flooding the cavern in pulsing amber. The spiral rotated, slow as moonrise. Wind surged from hidden vents, extinguishing torches, yet the room glowed bright. The slab split, edges sliding apart noiselessly, to reveal a spiral stair descending into blue radiance. A sigh seemed to whisper from below, words in a language none knew, gentle yet beckoning. Roderick caught Rhaena's arm. "We go together." They signaled their men to hold position. Only ember and ashes followed as the heirs started down. The stair wound steep. Walls pulsed with veins of soft luminescence. After some 20 turns, it opened on a circular chamber half filled with steaming water. Surface rippling phosphorescent. At its center rose a stone dais supporting a single object. An egg of crystal the size of a man's helm, within which flickered tiny motes of red and blue. Rhaena approached in awe, feeling heat radiate though frost clung to brows. "A dragon's egg," she breathed. Yet something about its shimmer said otherwise. Stranger, older. Roderick lifted it into gloved hands. It weighed light, almost buoyant. Inside, flecks of obsidian swirled like snow in molten glass. Ember whined, ears flat. Ashes growled low. Suddenly, the chamber trembled. Above, a muffled horn blast, 3 notes, echoed down the stair. Whites sighted. Roderick cradled the egg while Rhaena retrieved the sickle. They hurried up as frost exhalations gusted around them. At the cave mouth, the guard ringed torches. Out in the tree line, whites advanced. A ragged crescent of dead whisper quiet on deep snow. At their center strode 2 others armored in ice scale, eyes burning cobalt. Roderick ordered shield wall. The heirs donned obsidian daggers. The sickle glowed faint orange. Ember and ashes bounded into flank cover. The first wave struck like silence shattering. Spears punched through torsos, but dead limbs clawed still. Crossbow bolts hissed, dropping bodies that crawled even after heads parted. Rhaena wielded sickle in wide arcs. Each stroke severed bone with unnatural ease, leaving wounds that burned amber before freezing. The others advanced untouched, blades trailing frost. One lunged for Roderick. He parried with Valyrian steel, sparks of rime spraying. The creature's strength numbed his arms. It thrust. Roderick sidestepped barely. Ember leapt, jaws closing on the ice blade. Teeth shattered. The wolf yelped. Rage flooded Roderick. He pivoted, driving his sword pommel into the other's visor. The crystal cracked. Fissures spidered. Rhaena darted in, slashing across the fracture with the sickle. Light flared. The creature exploded into powder. The second other screamed, a sound of glaciers grinding, and charged. Roderick tossed the egg to Rhaena, drew a dragonglass dirk with his offhand. He and the other met in a clash of black and pale. Blades locked. Frost crawled along Roderick's guard. As knees buckled, ashes launched from behind, latching onto the other's leg. The distraction gave Rhaena angle. She hurled the sickle. It spun like a living comet, cleaving the creature across shoulder. Light burst. Shards danced in air. Whites faltered as leaders fell. Soldiers pressed advantage, hackling until the clearing glittered with shattered bone. Snow stained with ichor steamed in torchlight. Breath ragged, Roderick lifted Ember's bleeding muzzle, whispering comfort. The direwolf licked his glove, though a fang hung loose. Life stayed. Rhaena retrieved the sickle. Its glowed dimmer, as if drained. They wrapped the egg in layered furs, lashed it to a shield sled. Whole party withdrew double time toward Eastwatch, horns signaling triumph yet wary of pursuit. Snow thickened, twilight swallowed tracks behind them. Back at Eastwatch, Harmon examined the egg beneath 7 layers of warding circles. He declared it neither dragon nor ice spawn, but an amalgam. The child of fire and frost. Aegon, returned wounded but alive from raids, stared at the egg in enthralled silence. Torrhen, leaner now, laid a hand on his son's shoulder, pride luminous. "You found the key," Aegon said. "A heart that beats with both halves. Perhaps this is what the Wall has hungered for. Balance." Maester Harmon hypothesized the egg could anchor new wards, bridging Valyrian fire magic with First Men ice runes. Placed within a hard ice node, it might weave a network that repelled darkness across whole leagues. Debate raged for nights. Some feared hatching unknown terrors. Others saw salvation. Visenya, voice steely, insisted they seize opportunity. Rhaenys gentler, urged caution but agreed. In the end, Torrhen and Aegon decided they would attempt a rite at the cavern where the egg was found. Under full moon, shamans of the forest, pyromancers of Dragonstone, and maesters bearing faith-blessed oils would gather, forging a concord of every creed. Preparations began, ritual scripts translated to 3 tongues, pillars carved of dragon glass and weirwood entwined, casks of wildfire diluted to glowing amber to channel controlled heat. Rhaena and Roderick practiced the sickle's activation, slicing air to keep its edge alive. As moon waxed, the enemy grew restless. Scout ravens reported massing bodies near the ruined ice shelf, swarming like ants across black beaches. Storm clouds bruised the horizon with electric blue, lightning dancing inside spirals of snow. The right date set, Torrhen and Aegon departed with a host to secure the site. Roderick and Rhaena followed in their train. At the king's insistence, the Pact's heirs must witness unity or the spell would fail. Ember limped but refused to stay. Ashes guarded him devotedly. Under stars hard as cold iron, they reached the mirror cave. Torches illuminated walls, reflecting infinite fire. The egg placed on the dais, runes lined in concentric circles. Shamans chanted slow rhythms. Pyromancers spiraled flame in controlled arcs. Septons intoned blessings. At apex, Rhaena approached, sickle raised, and cut her palm. Blood dripped onto the egg. Roderick followed, adding his own. The egg drank crimson, glowing purple. Spirals lit along floor, weaving fire and frost in luminous braids. A tremor rocked the cavern. Outside, horns blared, enemy attack. Whites swarmed down slopes, led by a tall other astride, a spider-like mount of ice. Dragons roared overhead, swooping into fray. The ritual circle could not be broken. Heirs must hold position. Whites flooded the entry. Brandon Snow and Visenya slew with furious grace, but numbers mounted. Roderick tightened grip on sword. Rhaena held sickle over egg, trance-bound. Amber light filled the chamber, columns vibrating. A figure materialized within glow. The apparition of a child of the forest, eyes pools of gold. It spoke in words like wind chimes. Harmon gasped. It demanded final sacrifice, fire for ice. Aegon, battered from fighting, stumbled in. He understood without translation. He reached to draw a dagger across his forearm, but Rhaena cried, "No!" She stepped forward, hands cupping the egg. It pulsed warmly, heartbeat syncing with hers. Roderick realized. "Heir's blood," he whispered. "Blood of Pact." He joined, placing his hand atop hers. Their mingled blood trickled onto crystal. Light flared blinding white, then poured outward like dawn. A wave pulsed through stone, rippling far beyond. Outside, whites froze mid-attack, ice fracturing across their joints as if jolted by unseen force. The other reined its mount, sensing doom. From within its crystalline helm poured steam. Its spider collapsed, limbs disintegrating. Dragons circled, flames unneeded. The enemy crumbled to dust. In the cavern, light subsided. The egg remained, now clear glass, heartbeat stilled. Rhaena and Roderick collapsed, not in pain but drained. Flames of torches dimmed, replaced by soft, ambient glow suffusing walls. The cave alive with faint warmth. Harmon studied the chamber entrance. An invisible membrane now pulsed, like soap film glowing aurora hues. 8, he breathed. Sealed to dark, open to light. Across the realm, watchers later reported luminous arcs appearing at every heart-ice nexus. Dead things near them faltered. Storms weakened. Snow eased. The enemy yet survived, deep far north forts still bred cold. But a line had been drawn, luminous and living, stretching across the wall and into roots beneath, bound by blood of fire and ice. For the first time in living memory, the midnight wind carried no scent of fear. Months passed. Winter loosened grudging grip. Pale crocus speared through snowdrifts around Eastwatch. Refugees returned to salted fishing shacks. Ships sailed unmolested. Arbor wine flowed again. The ironborn retreats proved futile. Blockades penned them to barren rocks. In King's Landing, Septon bells heralded grand announcement. A royal betrothal now formalized by papal decree. Rhaena Targaryen, Princess of Dragonstone and Blood of Fire, to wed Roderick Stark, heir of Winterfell and Blood of Ice, at midsummer. Nobles from Dorne to Bear Island debate a journey to the far north for festivities rumored to feature dragonfly displays. Roderick found starlit moments to wander parapets with Rhaena. Speaking of dreams, she confided she sometimes heard dragon song inside the crystal egg. Soft lullabies. He told her he dreamed of building harbors so strong krakens would lodge harmless in their chains. They laughed, the sound weaving with gull cries. Yet no one forgot war's embers. Beyond Frostfangs, scouts spied new shapes, towering brutes fashioned from amalgamated corpse ice, seemingly immune to fire. In the shivering sea, bergs glimmered with unnatural blue. The Dead's king had retreated, not surrendered. Torrhen and Aegon met often in low councils. Plans brewed, alliances with Summer Islanders for dragonglass trade. Forging of new glass steel composite. Training wyverns from Sothorios in fireless combat. The Pact's heirs would soon bear command. One late twilight, on the highest tower of Eastwatch, Torrhen and Aegon stood silent. Sea below lapped gentle, unchanged by human triumphs. Aegon spoke first. "We broke one spear of night, many remain." "A war of generations," Torrhen agreed. "But generations now hold hands." Aegon chuckled softly. "Wolves who fear no flame. Dragons who respect snow. Our grandchildren may witness dawn unclouded. Nanin, only if we keep tending the fire," Torrhen said, gazing south where auroras flickered faint green. "And remember the cold." Down in the yard, Roderick and Rhaena practiced slow dance of blades taught by Brandon. Ice weaving through fire. Their movements perfect mirrored arcs in dust-soft dusk, swirling embers of torchlight. Ember and Ashes sat watchful. Heads tilted, eyes gleaming gold. Night drew in. Stars shimmered. Lanterns spotted ramparts. Somewhere far north, in glacier halls yet unbroken, enemies nursed wrath. But here, within walls of living ice warmed by newfound heart, the heirs of Pact moved like promise incarnate, steel and grace, fire and frost, each breath forging future strokes in a story not yet told. Word spread in crackling hearth tales. A new constellation had appeared above Eastwatch. Twin stars bright beside the moon. Sailors called them the Wolf and the Dragon. Farmers whispered they guarded against dark skies. Children traced them in frost on shutters, dreaming of dragons' wings shielding snowbound cottages. In quiet cells, maesters quilled fresh pages. In the year of the shimmering gate, hope kindled in union, and light walked through ice. And so the tale continued, slow and long, as all true tales must, etched not in swift strikes of sword but in the patient sculpting of seasons, the steady hammering of purpose. For the Pact endured, breathing in every heart that dared believe ice and fire could share a single dawn. And against the hush of night, the chorus of such hearts rose, bright and brave, singing that dawn home,